The opinions and viewpoints expressed in .NET Rocks are not necessarily those of its sponsors, or of Microsoft Corporation, its partners, or employees. .NET Rocks is a production of Franklin's Net, which is solely responsible for its content. Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter. Hey, Rockheads! Abort your transaction and listen up. It's time for another stellar episode of .NET Rocks, the internet audio talk show for .NET developers with Carl Franklin and Rory Blythe. This is Jeff Maciolik, here to announce show number 68 with guests Benjamin Mitchell and John Bristowe, recorded live Thursday, June 17th. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net, training developers to work smarter, and now offering hands-on VB.NET and ASP.NET classes remotely, online at www.franklins.net. And by Data Dynamics, makers of ActorReports.net. Simple, powerful, and cost-effective reporting for Windows Forms and ASP.NET web applications, online at www.datadynamics.com. And by Dundas Chart, advanced technology, advanced results, online at www.dundaschart.com. Support is also provided by Code Magazine, Microsoft Technologies in-depth for IT managers and developers, online at www.code-magazine.com. And now, the man who really knows his woofer from his tweeter, Carl Franklin.
Tweet, tweet. Rough. Hey, man. And won't you please welcome my co-host, my partner in crime from Portland, Oregon tonight, sounding like he's just in the other room, Mr. Badass himself, Rory Blythe. What's up, man?
What's up?
What's happening? Star of stage, screen, and tech ed movies.
Yeah, not a lot going on. Hanging out, just sort of enjoying the rather pleasant weather in Portland. It's been absolutely beautiful the past few days, which translates into like 95 degrees inside of my apartment and 110% humidity. I'm sort of taking a shower all the time.
We're sort of in the same boat here. It's a bit humid.
So,
you know, it's humid when you put on your air conditioner in your car and like mist comes out, you know?
Right, yeah.
How's the dog?
The dog is fabulous. The only bad thing I have figured out about having a dog is that the treats that we give him, the little treats that we give him for going to the bathroom outside and for sitting down and not chewing on the furniture, they smell really good. And they smell better than the food we get to eat.
Have you tasted them?
You know, I haven't, but when I was a kid, see, this is a problem. This has been a problem my whole life. When I was a kid, we had cats, and I used to love the smell of dry cat food, and I used to actually stick my head in the bag of Meow Mix and just inhale. And
I used
just
to love
love
the smell
it. I mean,
of boiling cats. Those smelled really, really good.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, but Meow Mix actually smells really good. Although it doesn't taste as good as it smells. That's the problem with Meow Mix. But I'm kind of back in that state now where I'm kind of getting the dog treats out. I'm like, should I give that to the dog or should I eat the dog treats? And that's sort of problematic. And tonight I gave him what looks like a stretched and dried piece of pig intestine that's been cured and salted for him to chew on. And, you know, at first it was kind of gross, but he chewed on it for about 10 minutes, and I started thinking that actually looks pretty good. So
what'd you have for dinner tonight, Rory?
That. What did I have for dinner? I haven't had dinner yet. I went out to lunch with Chris Sells.
So all this food is making you hungry? All this talk about dog food and cat food?
It's not actually making me hungry.
Okay,
it's
I'm
a chew
checking.
Toy, really. I mean, you're supposed to suck on that piece of intestine. You don't actually swallow.
Well, I know. You said that looked good, and Meow Mix smelled good, and, you know.
It does. It doesn't taste good, though.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, so that's been my life for the week, hanging out with the dog. What's up with you?
Well, this week I've been sort of relaxing and writing some code and taking care of things. I've been working on this program to do some real-time audio encoding. Jeff and I sort of lit a spark under each other when we were talking, when we were editing the show over the weekend, and we were thinking about how this could be done. So I've been doing that, had my head in the code, and also going to Montreal this weekend for DevTeach. I'm actually driving up there tomorrow, and that should be fun. It's about a 6.5, maybe 7-hour drive, and it should be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that. Other than that, just sitting around trying to stay cool and enjoy the weather. I've been hanging out a lot with my kids. Yep.
Well,
oh, boy.
That's awesome.
There's a certain dynamic that you lose when you're not in the studio, It's like can't see each other. I can't see you making faces, when the guest is trying to say something that sounds important. Yep.
Yeah, that's why we need to get some video chat hookup going on.
Yeah, we'll
or
do
something.
that. And speaking of the studio, your friend and mine, Joe Grenier, is in the studio tonight. Hey, Joe.
Which is cool.
Hey, Rory.
He did bring some beer. I'm having a Sea Dog India Pale Ale right now.
Cool.
And you're drinking
that
something
would be
else.
a little difficult there, Joe.
Yeah, he's got a harpoon. So good.
I've got a glass of water, and I've got 20 milligrams of cardine that I'm going to have to take at about 8 o'clock. So
actually, if you take that cardine with some alcohol, some hard alcohol, that will increase the effectiveness of it. And that's a joke. So
that's actually true. that is entirely. It will also probably melt my liver, so I'm going to avoid that for the time being.
Right.
If I feel like having that sort of experience. Yeah. No, it's actually been kind of tough because I moved to a lower dose of the cardine, but the old stuff was time release, and this it all hits you at once, and it really lays me out. My blood pressure drops to like 1. Now
I've been waiting to lay this on you, some information from my family life until we got on the show because I wanted to hear your reaction. But
okay.
My littlest daughter Clara, she's 2.
Yeah,
got Lyme disease.
Yeah. Are you serious?
Yeah, she's okay. She's taking antibiotics and she's going through the regular treatment.
Whoa.
But she contracted it. Yep, and we didn't even see a tick bite. She just had a fever.
So how did you find out?
Well, she had a fever, and then we took some. What did we do? The fever wasn't going away, so we figured it wasn't a virus, so we had some blood drawn. And here's the interesting thing about Lyme disease, ladies and gentlemen, is that normal Lyme disease is caused by a bacteria, but it's not caused by the bacteria, going and attacking your system like normal bacteria does, which causes your white blood cell count to increase. Your white blood cell count actually does not increase when you have this bacteria. It's a byproduct of the bacteria that's a toxin that causes the problem. So when you take antibiotics, you get rid of the bacteria, and then slowly the toxin leaves your body. But it's not the bacteria in and of itself that, in other words, the white blood count came back in the blood work to be normal. And that was a clue to them. It's really cool. And, my wife Gretchen is a nurse, and she's thinking of going into infectious disease as a specialty. And it's these little kind of puzzles that are, it's actually a very cool field to get into.
Wow, man.
Yeah, that's what I want to tell you, because we were all like, you're not going to get Lyme disease. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Wow, man. Well, I hope she's all right, and I hope everything
she's
goes
fine.
well.
She's totally fine.
Is she taking doxycycline?
She is taking amoxicillin. For kids under 8, they usually prescribe amoxicillin for 21 days.
Yeah. Well, cool.
And,
I hope that works out.
Yeah, and we think we caught it in time. The thing with Lyme disease is it's very easy to catch in time, but if you don't catch it in time, it can completely screw you up. I mean, I know a woman who has a paralyzed eye because she didn't treat it in time.
Right.
And other people, it attacks your joints, so they have trouble walking. It's like an arthritis effect, whatever.
Yep.
Well, anyway.
It's a messed up thing.
It is.
Move on to something a little happier.
Yeah, but she's totally fine, and don't worry about it.
Good.
Yeah, so we got some mail, Rory. We actually we had a sort of a dearth of mail here for the last few weeks, and it's good to get some feedback, and I'd encourage people out there listening. Oh, and speaking of feedback, I wrote a chat program. I just started talking about it last week that I'm writing this chat program, but we're actually using it live in the show, and we're just testing it out tonight. So
it's working really well, though.
Yeah, it's working well. It's working a lot better than the Yahoo thing.
It's nice and it's lightweight.
Yeah, it's very light.
Well, so.
Yep. All right, so here's the mail we got. This one is from Jeffrey Goldberg, who sent us a very amusing letter. He's an attorney on Wall Street in New York, and he sent us a great letter a couple of weeks ago, and we sent him some useless crap, and he sent this back. Carl, just wanted to thank you for the article of quote-unquote useless crap you sent me, the .NET Rocks mug. In particular, I know you'll appreciate this, but it's not useless at all. In fact, it's perfect for drinking the Macallan 30-year-old I recently received as a gift. He has good taste. Although I must admit I don't normally drink my scotch from a coffee mug. I had to debunk the useless qualifier wrongfully assigned to your perfectly useful crap. Although still crap, the mug is not only useful, but it is aesthetically enhanced with both yours and Rory's mugshot on the front.
Aesthetically enhanced?
Yeah.
That is some careful language.
Well, he's a lawyer, I must say that it's an interesting concept, mugs with mugshots. Maybe you can have Bob Russellman back on the show to discuss that for a couple of hours. Anyway, I just listened to your latest show with Rocky Lotka and was happy that you had him as a guest. I read his book a couple months ago and was extremely impressed with his ability to explain its subject matter. I still want you guys to check out Declare It. That's Deklarit. Have you heard of that, Joe, or anybody?
No.
Roy?
I've heard of it. I haven't used it.
Yeah, same here. Because it's frustrating to hear you discuss the problems with data sets, specifically regarding their current inability to encapsulate business logic, because that's exactly what Declare It does. In fact, I was all set to use Rocky's CSLA until I stumbled upon this product. Although not as powerful as Rocky's CSLA framework, it's perfect for my project and addresses many of the concerns that CSLA also addresses. So if you're looking for a rad tool that does it all, check out Declare. Oh, and have Andres, I don't know how to say that, Andre Aguiar on the show. He deserves to be recognized for this product. Well, I think he's got the recognition, so there you go. You got in a plug. Anyway, thanks for the mug. You guys are great. P.S. This is not a feeble attempt to gather yet another piece of useful crap. Just wanted to convey my thanks for the mug and renew my earlier suggestions. So there you go.
Cool.
Yeah, this guy's great. I wish he wrote into every show because he's entertaining to listen to. Second one comes from Michael G. Can't read your last name. Sorry, Michael. Carl and Rory. And this is a reference to the Google thing, the Yoda library card Google reference. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, he says that is a line from the movie Seven, 1995, spoken by Brad Pitt to Morgan Freeman commenting about the serial killer they are investigating, Kevin Spacey. One of the cable channels played the movie all weekend here in Connecticut. Its movie website is www.newline.com/site/7. Thanks. Thanks for clearing that up, Mike.
And for sucking the mystery right out of it.
Exactly.
That's okay. Right, though. Sometimes I wonder where these things come from, so that's cool.
Yeah. It's good to explain your references. I missed it, This one is from Aaron Junod, and he says, Carl and Rory, I've been listening to the show for a long time, and I've heard them all. I even liked the one where Mark and Carl went to the pub, although a bit on the strange side. Yes, it was. In fact, this may be the only place I get my news, so you guys might want to start covering current events for us. What happened this week anyway, Joe? Let's do a little current events segment. What happened in the news this week?
Well, I've been writing a lot of code, so I'm really not sure.
I don't know either. I've been doing the same. Okay, enough of that segment. Let's move on. Yeah, something about some commission on the 9/11 thing, and there's no link. There's no link with weapons of mass destruction or Iraq and Al Qaeda or something.
I taught my puppy how to go to the bathroom outside.
A president did die, and a puppy went to the bathroom outside. Moving right along. I am writing this since you guys have not given out any useless crap in a long time, and, well, I can always use useless crap for something. Okay, I think we are going to take Jeffrey's comment to heart and start calling it useful crap. What do you think? So I'll just do a mental search and replace on the word useless here. So I can always use useful crap for something. So how about it? Give me some useful crap. Now on to the point of the email. First of all, you got it, Aaron. You got it. Now on to the point of the email. Having just listened to the TDD show, that's the John Alexander Test-Driven Development, I wanted to share a few thoughts. We employ unit testing here at work and have had success with it thus far. I think one of the major factors in our success is also the automated build process using continuous integration, and Joe is raising his hands in victory. You've used this?
I'm attempting to implement it right now, and I think it is a fantastic thing.
All right, so let me explain what he says it. We use cruisecontrol.net, CCNet for CI. Its job is to monitor VSS and build when something changes. This means that any developer on the team can check in code and within minutes get an email with the FXCOP and NUnit results of the entire application and address any issues immediately. This allows us to address issues that have been introduced extremely quickly and also gives us a means of reporting on the status of the app as a whole at any given time, thus adding a lot of value to our builds and unit tests. And FXCOP is something I don't think we've mentioned on the show before. Maybe it's come up in passing, but it's buried on Microsoft's got.net site. But what it is it's a framework cop. It tells you how much your application is conforming to the standards, the Microsoft.net standards, and it's a good thing. You look like you wanted to say something about that.
No, I was just saying that we've had a little bit of trouble integrating cruisecontrol.net with Visual SourceSafe because the way our Visual SourceSafe is set up.
Oh, needless to say, everybody's waiting for a Visual Studio Team system, so they won't have these problems. Rory, have you used FXCOP?
I have used FXCOP actually, and I love FXCOP.
Cool.
I haven't. I don't take everything that it says, to heart. I don't take advantage of everything that it reports on, but because I'm not really like building frameworks or anything like that. Usually when I'm doing development, but for a lot of what I do, it's been pretty helpful. So cool. And I'm a real standards bastard. I want things to be done a certain way, and FXCOP just happens to like things done the same way. So I love it.
He says, the other thing I would like to comment on is pair programming. Although we do not do pair programming all the time, we do use it for instances where it makes sense for us. For the majority of the applications, coders work on their respective parts of the system based on the design set forth beforehand. We handle lower-level components slightly different, though. As a team, we'll discuss how it should work from a high level, but when it comes time for implementation, there will be 2 coders on it. This allows us to play off each other quite a bit and really drives a much better design. I think it's helped greatly with some of the more complex things that have needed to be done, and actually really enjoy doing it as a pair. Of course, if all my code had to be done in a pair situation, I'd probably feel very different about it. And he also wants to take this chance to thank you guys for the show. The new format is great, and the Monday commute is by far the best of the week. Keep them coming. Aaron Junod from .NET Thinking, that's blog.iceglue.com. Aaron, thanks for writing us. Cool. Now, Rory, just as we got the page up that describes what the Google Weirdos is, you're throwing a monkey wrench in the process here, and you're going to stray a little bit from the format.
Just
so
for kicks, I was thinking this week we could do a little bit of in the news, a little bit of tech stuff, just what's kind of going on, and we haven't done this, we haven't rehearsed this, we haven't even talked about what it's going to be. Basically, I just went around to some sites and found some interesting tidbits, and I thought I'd read them off, maybe we could talk about them a little bit, and then move along.
Cool.
So the first thing that I found here that I wanted to talk about is a Jolan software piece that is getting a lot of attention right now.
Okay.
All over the place. It's his article. It's called How Microsoft Lost the API War.
Okay.
If you just go to jolansoftware.com/articles/APIwar.html, you'll find it. And he's essentially talking about how it might be a big mistake to go from Win32 to WinFX, about how Microsoft loses a lot of backwards compatibility in doing that, and probably estranges some developers and customers, and talks about the lengths to which Microsoft has gone in the past to accommodate developers when it's making changes. One great example that it gives is how they actually modified part of Windows so that SimCity would run properly. It was a DOS app, and it was trying to reuse memory that it had freed, and I guess that was okay in DOS because you're not dealing with a multitasking environment,
right?
So you don't really have to worry about anybody coming along and snatching your memory. But in Windows, you did, and this was a problem. So they actually modified part of Windows to recognize when SimCity was running, so that SimCity could do its bad deed and get away with it. Like a lot of Jolan software articles, it's not really something that I agree with wholeheartedly, but also, like a lot of Jolan software articles, it definitely gets you thinking.
Right.
And it's really a great article. I mean, I happen to love the idea of WinFX. I love the idea of just .netting everything. And I love what I've seen in Longhorn so far. But obviously there's some people out there who might not be so excited. So it's a good view. So
I'm sort of reserving judgment. I'm sort of reserving judgment until I see a little bit more.
Yeah. probably wise.
Yeah.
Then the next one, there was an interview with Steve Ballmer at ActiveWin.com.
Okay.
And the URL for this interview is www.activewin.com/interviews/Microsoft/36, that's numeral 3, numeral 6.shtml. And what I like about this article is Microsoft has been pretty quiet about outsourcing, or actually offshoring, I should say. And they talked to him about this. They got one question in there, and I actually really liked his response, so I wanted to read it on the air.
Sure.
ActiveWin says, how do you feel the outsourcing of technology jobs to countries such as India or China has affected Microsoft? And Steve Ballmer says, as a global company, our future... Actually, should I do it in the Steve Ballmer voice? No, I shouldn't do that, should I? Okay. As a global company, our future growth and success requires
No. What are you, nuts? You can't do that.
All right, okay. Nobody heard that. Erase your memories. Okay. So, as a global company... As a global company, our future growth and success requires that we constantly look at ways to improve our ability to serve customers worldwide. This involves growing our presence in key regions and tapping into the growing technical talent pool outside the U.S. India is emerging as a world-class IT leader, and as China's economy grows, addressing the needs of its broadening customer base is not only important, but a great opportunity. The majority of our core development work will remain in Redmond, but by developing local programs, expertise, and presence around Microsoft technology, our customers can benefit from the technical expertise and skill found in those regions, and from the innovations and value that will come from these emerging markets tomorrow.
And so can Microsoft benefit from that.
Well, what I like about that is that he's essentially saying, look, we're keeping Microsoft in Redmond, but we have to expand. We have to go worldwide. We have to move some of our work abroad, and that's just part of being a global company. And I thought it was a very sober answer, so I love that one.
That's good.
The next one is Mono 1 Beta 3 was released this week, which is kind of exciting. And I got pretty excited just because it looks like the Cocoa Sharp bindings are coming along, and those are bindings for the Cocoa framework, which is what you code against when you're coding on OS 10. So now you can you're beginning to be able to do .NET work on OS 10 that runs against Cocoa. So you can begin to write GUI apps for OS 10 using .NET, which is fantastic.
That's cool.
I've been waiting for this for a long time. So that's good news. Then I've got two more things.
Okay.
There's a really fun poster that just came out from O'Reilly. It's the history of programming languages. And that's available at www.o'reilly.com/news/graphics/prog_lang_poster.pdf. That's prog_lang_poster.pdf. And it's fabulous. It's way too large to view in one monitor. I mean, you'd have to go get some really fancy printer to get this sucker out the way you want it.
And the very
just
first language, Fortran.
Yeah, it's awesome.
That's what
they've
says.
got everything on here. Yeah. You can look at you can see like how Java progressed. You can see how ActionScript progressed. You can see that the PHP developers like to release a new version of PHP every 19 minutes. You can see Perl and VBNet. You can see C#. It's really very cool. That's some geeky stuff that I think people would really enjoy. Now, lastly, this is one that I thought might start a little conversation. This is on Slashdot, and the title is Munich Votes for Linux Migration Plan. Okay? Essentially,
I knew Germany had sort of sworn off Windows before, and they were all open source, weren't they?
I don't know.
State software that happened like last year, didn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of what they're doing here, and it's kind of it raises a lot of issues because the German news site reports blah 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 that the City Council of Munich has voted for the detailed concept of the Linux for Munich project with votes from all parties except the CSU, the Christlich Sozial Union. It's a little hard for me to say because of the German word. But the point is, with this decision, the 13,000 desktops and servers of the city administration will be migrated to Linux. Now, the money that they're going to save in licensing fees, they're going to more than lose, I have little doubt, in trying to move 13,000 desktops to a different operating system. It's one of these situations where it seems...
We're gonna watch that unfold and keep tabs on it, and
that is a good point.
Maybe we can keep up with the news and on the show and see how it goes.
That is actually a really good idea. That's a good idea. I would love to see what this winds up costing in the end.
Yep.
I mean, if they had started with Linux, it would have been one thing. But trying to move 13,000 desktops is just asking for trouble.
Yep.
And for rather large bills. And they're going to have to pay some consultant somewhere to do this work. And
she's trying to move 13,000 desktops from one version of Windows to another is bad enough. You know? It's like, now we're going to just totally change the operating system.
Yeah. So that's the news for the week.
Try to tell 13,000 people where the the start button is or whatever.
Right. There's a few changes, everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's right.
The
they can just write their own start
that.
button.
Their own start button. Well, sorry we don't have any music for this, but I think it's a good bit. What do you think? Good bit? Out there in live listener land, you think that's a good bit? Yeah, we're getting some positive comments, so that's good.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I think it's time to announce the guest, don't you think? And before we do that, Rory, I don't have any crap to give away today. Let me look in the box and see what we have here. Hang on a second. All right. Actually, we do have some stuff to give away today. We have just a sort of a bunch of different this and that swag. We've got, and we'll give the whole package away to one lucky listener. We've got a visualstudio.net camera / lunchbox bag. We've got an Xbox game, Amped 2. We've got a Windows XP notepad, spiral notebook. We've got a Microsoft Blue coffee mug to go in that bag. And we've also got a boxed PC edition of Halo. Not Halo 2, sorry, Halo. Sorry. But, it's still probably the most popular game in the world right now. So the lucky namespace of the day is system.g.wiz.this.swag.sucks. And there you go.
Well, that would be easy to remember. All right.
Okay, so our guests, we have two guests today, Benjamin Mitchell and John Bristowe. Benjamin is an independent contractor and a Microsoft regional director based in the UK. Having worked as a lead developer and architect on some of the largest internet sites in Australia, he moved to London several years ago to be part of larger challenges. Wait a minute. I thought Australia was larger than London. Okay. That's just dumb, wasn't it? I'm sorry. He moved to a small island to get some larger challenges. Recent engagements have involved helping global banking clients create web service security frameworks. He's passionate about improving development practices through agile methodologies and making the web easier to use for applications with web services. He has spoken frequently at user groups across the UK, as well as TechEd San Diego and the upcoming TechEd Amsterdam. In almost 10 years of development experience, he's managed to pass 20 exams and holds MSCD, MSCE, and SCJP certs. He maintains a blog at benjaminm.net. And hey, Benjamin, how are you?
I'm great, Cal.
Okay. John Bristowe is a systems analyst with Quadris Development Incorporated, a .NET training and consulting firm based in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. Since its beta, John has been working feverishly with the .NET framework, evaluating, developing, and rigorously testing all facets of .NET offerings as they are released. John has a passion for, and as such a constant focus on, service-oriented architectures and associated XML web services, plumbing, and protocols. John is a Microsoft Regional Director and an MVP for ASP.NET. John, how are you?
I'm awesome. How are you guys?
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you both could make it.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, what's up?
I just wanted to say a couple things. Rory, you're not the only one who enjoys the smell of Meow Mix. So
you guys are sick.
Dude, it smells really good, Carl. You just got to stick your head in a bag sometime and find out. You got to try it like the other kids, or else you're not going to know.
And secondly, Benjamin has a much better synopsis of his bio than I do. I have to really improve on mine.
Well, the facts are there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
See, I think that was something.
If you
want
to keep it simple,
the United Kingdom is bigger than Australia. Smaller island,
right.
Bigger place.
Smaller island, bigger place.
Right.
Yeah.
More people.
So I guess maybe we should start with a state of things today. What state are web services in these days? Where are we?
So, I think your chat client, Carl, is showing us just how good web services are in the real world today. You were saying you started this a week ago?
Yeah.
And so within a week, you're able to use the .NET framework and its support for web services to pull up a chat.
Actually, I wrote the whole thing in an evening, actually.
In an evening, even better.
Yeah.
And so, I think something like that shows us just how good things are with web services today.
What he's talking about, for those who don't know, is an application that I wrote that uses web services to do a simple sort of chat and it came out of necessity too, because we were using the Yahoo chat room for a while and it just sort of sucked. I mean, you can't get in there. So I'm looking for something interesting to do with web services, and a chat program isn't really the first thing that you think of when you say, what am I going to do with web services? Because it's sort of stateful and web services are stateless. So I just figured out how to bridge the gap there.
Right.
Definitely. And I think some of the other cool things too is that we're seeing people like Amazon and Google implementing web services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, you built your chat app in a night. I mean, if you've ever gone to Amazon, you can basically register as a developer there, and then within about 3 minutes, you can download and have a list of books with the image URLs coming into Visual Studio just using web services. And they're actually using that to drive an enormous amount of their business. So I think web services today are in a very healthy state, and things are just looking better in the future.
As a matter of fact,
and things are spawning some very exciting projects off that. Benjamin mentions Amazon, but you're looking at various projects available off God.net in the workspaces that are incorporating web services and getting some nice interoperability between various applications.
Rory, you did some work with the Amazon Web Services, right?
Yep, I did my RSS for Charity thing with AWS, and it like Benjamin said, it really is that easy. You just sign up, you get going. When I did it, you just grabbed WSDL definition and generated your classes, and you were up and running. So it's a very cool system to be able to tap into Amazon like that, and and you can do it.
I think the point with Amazon too is that it's proving not only that web services with the WSDL can be consumed easily within .NET, but that's also an interoperable solution. So anyone on any platform can go out there and get that.
Yeah,
that's also is a viable business model.
Sure, that's what struck me when I started downloading and using it, and I guess I didn't get as far as into it as Rory did. It was a bit confusing for me because it wasn't really written for .NET programmers. It was at a much lower level, at an XML level, and connect to this website, send this header. Here's the SOAP envelope. But
I think the thing is, as Rory is saying, the WSDL is the key there. If you get Visual Studio up and point it at the WSDL, then it will automatically create the proxy class for you. And then You're right. There's a little bit that you got to do in terms of understanding what the content of their messages is. But
assuming you're playing nice, of course. Not a lot of people generate nice WSDL files. So
that's true. Yeah. But it really should insulate you from the scary angle brackets, basically.
We love angle brackets, don't we?
Well, some of us do. What? How are web services in terms of interoperability these days? Because I've heard mixed results, and obviously Amazon has figured it out, and they've got an API that works in Java, it works in Unix, it works wherever you use it. But what are the challenges today?
So I think that the interoperability story is sort of an ongoing one. We're never going to get to the point where suddenly everything is interoperable. But I think what's different about web services versus other kinds of technology pushes in the past is just that there are so many people keen on working at it, and they're doing so much. So I think the basic stuff that Amazon's using, the WSI, the WS Interoperability Group, have done a great job coming out with a basic profile of the web service technologies, such as WSDL and SOAP 1.1, and saying we're going to put in effort to make sure that there's an implementation of web services on lots of different platforms that can support this subset of the technologies.
And has that panned out?
Sorry?
Has that panned out? How's the Java support, for example?
I think the Java support for the basic profile stuff is great. John, do you have any experience?
Yeah, the Java stuff is pretty good, actually. I've worked with various toolkits, including the ETTK, which is the IBM offering, and they have some great support for web services. I would hesitate, though, if I were speccing out an application to target web services, I would hesitate going towards a Java platform, because with ASMX, it's really, really simple to get an endpoint up and running. So,
true.
But it's just awesome to see everyone come together, including IBM, BEA, Microsoft, and so forth.
Because it hasn't always been the case, right? I mean, I remember as early as a couple of years ago hearing from people who, said that Java's implementation was using a different version of SOAP than Microsoft's implementation. There was a little bit out of syncness happening, and
yeah, unfortunately, we went through a bit of a complexity arc there. SOAP 1 was quite simple. SOAP 1.1 was probably as complex as we could have made it, and then now with SOAP 1.2, we're making it a little bit easier. So I think as you see that complexity start to die down, and you see the composability of the specs that are being augmented in, you're seeing the toolkits basically follow suit.
Is SOAP 1.2 what's going to be supported in WIDBE? When is that supported in .NET?
I believe SOAP 1.2 is supported in WIDBE, yes, as well as in ASMAX.
Okay, and that doesn't mean it won't support 1.1 either, right?
No, we're just getting away from the complexity of SOAP 1.1.
Right. And I just wonder how that works. When you go to create a web service, will it support all versions of SOAP?
I haven't had much of a chance to delve into WIDBE as much as I'd like. However, I have seen some examples, and I believe that there are attributes to control both the serialization as well as the grokking of what's coming across the wire.
Okay. We have a question from somebody in the chat room, actually. Michael Earls. He says he has a question for Benjamin and John. I heard last night that we shouldn't be using WS-I 2.0 because Indigo is supposed to replace all of that work, and because WS-I 2.0 only has a 2-year support agreement. Should large-scale enterprises avoid using WS-I 2.0? Should WS-I 2.0 only be used by agile small businesses? Thoughts? I guess we should, before you answer that question, let's, we've given a little lip service to WS-I 2.0 and earlier versions, but let's, what the hell? Let's just redefine it and tell people what it is.
So WS-I is the Web Services Enhancements. It's basically a .NET class library that augments the .NET framework. So it's not part of the .NET framework, but it's basically seen as an augmentation to it. And essentially what it is just an implementation of various WS star specifications that are out there in the wild. Kind of looking at the 2-year, 3-year outlook, you shouldn't definitely avoid WS-I. WS-I is a great toolkit. But certainly the future direction is Indigo. If you look at WS-I, WS-I is purely for enthusiasts. It's people who want to start working with the WS specifications today. Indigo is kind of a refactoring of that, as well as bringing in some other technologies, including enterprise services, MSMQ, and so forth.
Just to sort of unpack the story, I mean, okay. what we've been talking about so far is just what you've got today in the .NET framework for doing web services, and we've talked about the WSI Basic Profile, which is an organization that's sort of saying we're going to work with a set of technologies. The thing is that it is basic. What we're missing is support for things like security and policy and things like that. So there are all these WS specifications coming out. People talk about WS-AlphabetSoup.
Right.
So what's happening is that having a specification but not being able to do anything with it is a bit frustrating. So Microsoft are interested in creating an implementation of all these WS specs that developers can use as a way of testing out whether the spec is useful and whether it's good enough to be sort of baked into the platform.
And the first one wasn't all that useful, right? WS-I 1.0?
Well, it did some things, and it gave early adopters a chance to sort of put their toe in the water and see what the specifications were like.
Right.
But definitely it's improving each time. The main point is that so the first one came out in December of the year before last, and 2 shipped in a tech preview in the middle of last year, and now we've got the release as a tech ed. Basically, all of this is happening much, much faster than Microsoft's able to get out versions of the .NET framework. So WS-I is sort of a side project that can ship more frequently than the base framework.
Right.
That lets early adopters have a look at these specifications and also provides Microsoft with important feedback about whether they work in the real world or not.
Right, and these specifications are in a high degree of churn mode, although that is starting to die down. But the nice thing about WS-I is it does give a small enough deliverable so that the WS-I team can get out actual bits to developers so they can start playing around with these specifications.
And another person in the chat room says, what would you do as an alternative? If you have a business need to use web services with security and policy now, what would be a better option if not WS-I 2.0?
Well, that's a great question, and it really highlights that the reason to use WS-I is if you need some of the functionality that it provides. And if you need it today, there isn't an alternative other than hand-rolling it and writing it yourself. So WYSI's basically, if you need any of the things that WYSI provides, then you should definitely be using it today. The thing to keep in mind is that when you do want to sort of move to Indigo, when that ships at some stage in future, there may be some manual work required in order to get that to work.
Right, and just to reemphasize that point, Benjamin was highlighting the fact that you can definitely get this up and running today. System.xml is perfectly fine to be doing all this stuff, but no one wants to work at that level. The nice thing about WYSI is that it provides an object model so you can quickly and easily get these specs up and running in your applications.
Above and beyond that, the standard object model, what is the reason, and define rolling your own? I mean, are you when you say rolling your own security, are you talking about making your own encryption algorithms that low, or are you talking about using say Rindle or something like that with keys?
No, absolutely not. In fact, the specifications outline specifically what type of encryption we're going to be using, which is XML encryption, a standard, of course. We also use another standard in the security model, which is XML signature.
Okay.
So the idea is that if you follow those specs, this basically gives a level of interoperability between platforms. Rolling your own, it would involve a lot of parsing of the XML itself. It would be very tedious, and as I said, no one really wants to work at that level.
Let me explain what I did with the chat room, because I do have security, and I guess you could say I rolled my own, but I didn't have to touch XML at all. So what I did was I implemented what basically is done with SSL, meaning that I have a public RSS key that ships with the app. I have a public-private key pair at the server. The client generates a symmetric key, a Rindle key, and it transports that. Everything is transported as base64 encoded binary data. So it transports it as base64 string, gets decoded, and then the server knows that is the key to use with that client, and it keeps that around. So then all the transmission that happens with that client gets encoded in serialized or however it is, binary, and then turned into a base64 string and sent across that way. So I didn't really have to touch XML at all. Managing my own keys, but other than that, it's working great. And this is something that people are advising against.
Well, the question I'd put there, Carl, is that I think your solution's great, and obviously it's working a treat here as we're talking. The thing is, if you wanted to talk to a Java client,
sure,
then they'd have to understand what you're doing in the content of that message. So one of the nice things
excellent point.
The WS security spec comes along and says is that actually the security isn't related to what's in the message, just like the stamp on envelope isn't related to the content of the letter to your grandma inside the envelope.
Right.
And it defines a standard way of putting that key information in a SOAP envelope header in a way that another platform could understand. And even better, the hope is that someone on a Java platform could just basically point their toolkit at your web service, and the toolkit would handle the decryption and the verification of the signature that came with your message.
Right. And this brings up another question. I understand the issue, and I understand the answer to this question I'm about to pose, but the listeners might be having this question. And we've asked this before on the show, too. I think it was Don Box we asked. I'm not sure who it was. Maybe it was Michele Leroux. But anyway, the question is, isn't there a danger in associating security with standards? In other words, if you're creating a toolkit to decrypt my keys, isn't that just making it that much easier for the unscrupulous out there to hack me? Now, the answer is no, of course, but I want you to address that issue.
So what you're saying is if we let people know how we're doing our security, then that would make it more hackable? So,
yes, that's a fear that people have.
Right, and so as you're saying, the answer to that one is that modern cryptography is all about people knowing the algorithms of how you're doing your security, that it's a very, very bad thing to keep the algorithm that you're using private, because there have been several public cases where there's been an algorithmic standard that's been shown to have security flaws in it. So the idea is that the algorithm should be public, but the key should be private. So understanding how the algorithm works is something that everyone can know, but you need to keep your key private in order to make the security successful.
And actually it has the opposite effect. You're absolutely more secure if if the algorithm is public.
Absolutely.
It's just like a real lock. I mean, it's like the idea of thinking that your home is going to be insecure just because somebody knows that your lock operates with tumblers inside, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they still need the key to get in. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless they have a sort of Tumblr deconstruction toolkit or something, but even so, that's not a very good analogy.
Called a boot.
Yeah, boot.
Basically.
Piece of dynamite.
Yeah.
Right. So tell me, what, as a developer, let's say I'm a VBNet developer, and because I am, as a matter of fact, and I install the web service extension enhancements, right? Not extensions.
Yep.
Web service enhancements 2.0 toolkit. I know I've tried using 1.0 in the past, and it just seemed like way too much for me to figure out, and I don't want to have that experience again. What is my developer experience like using this WS-AlphabetSoup 2.0 toolkit?
Well, if Benjamin and I actually recorded an MSDN TV session where we explained a little bit about how to get the canonical example out, which is the username token. It literally takes about 5 lines of code to get both encryption and signatures working inside your SOAP message. From a VB developer's perspective, it's very intuitive. Basically, the idea is that you target the object model, and you let the underlying plumbing do the heavy lifting.
Cool.
Absolutely, and one of the so I think we should sort of track back a little bit and sort of say, why would the VB developer be looking at using WS-AlphabetSoup 2? And basically, there's 4 reasons. I think that they need security on their web services, and they want to put that security inside the message rather than relying on a point-to-point protocol solution like HTTPS. The second one is policy, and this is a really cool way that lets developers specify the expectations about the security, for example, on the messages that they send and receive. And this allows you to do things like signing and encrypting a message with a particular security token with no lines of code in some situations, so 0 code at all.
Wow.
And then the third thing is that WS-AlphabetSoup lets you do web services over HTTP or over TCP, and it has support for using other protocols. So you don't need to host your web services in IIS anymore. You could have a TCP host, for example, in a Windows service. And so this increases the flexibility of the kind of things you're able to do with web services.
So even though you have this 2 lines of code, 5 lines of code that gets things up and working, you still have to manage your keys, right?
That's right.
You still have to create keys and keep them safe on the clients and keep them safe on the server. And
absolutely.
So it doesn't just make up keys for you and implement the security. It becomes a payload for your keys, right?
Well, in terms of your application where you're dynamically generating the key, you can add that key to a token and put that on the SOAP header and then send that around. So it just provides you a standard way of describing and transporting that key information.
Yeah.
Depending upon what security model, though, you're right. I mean, we still face some of the hurdles of PKI or public key infrastructure hurdles that we face all the time.
Right. And that would be no different with WS-AlphabetSoup or without, right?
No, because we're working with infrastructure. Although, WS-AlphabetSoup does provide you some excellent APIs for you to access things like secure stores and so forth.
Oh, okay. All right. Cool.
But the whole notion of key management is still one of those topics that we're still trying to figure out and make even easier.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a tough thing though, isn't it? Because ultimately, keeping those keys safe it can't be a standard. It's not like everybody should make a C:\keys directory, and that's where you should put your keys. That's
right.
Silly.
Security is admittedly a tough thing to get right. But we have tools available to us to make it easier.
Yeah.
The nice thing too, I'd say, Carl, is that the spec is done really nicely here. It basically just says if you are going to send security information around, here's what it should look like in XML in the SOAP header.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually say it doesn't mandate exactly what kind of algorithm you use or what kind of keys you use. Right. It's very nice in that it's pluggable like that. So if a better one came along in a couple of years, you could just put that one in the same place. So you're absolutely right. The standards haven't gone crazy. They're not mandating exactly how you should do your security. It's just a very flexible description of since you are using security, how you can describe it on the SOAP message.
And on that note, as far as mandating what use cases you should be doing, I mean, the specs themselves give always an addendum that says we recommend or we strongly recommend doing such and such.
Yeah.
With in relation to security and so forth.
Right.
Hey, can I just give a quick plug too, Carl? You were talking about the VB.NET developer having a great experience out of the box with WYSI 2. Mm-hmm. The WYSI team have done a superb job of putting all of their samples in C# and VB.
Oh, good.
So you can just open up the product and go to the samples directory and basically set up your website and then, set up the virtual directories and then play to your heart's content, all in VB land.
Awesome. I love it.
It is.
Sweet. Well, guys, sit tight while we listen to some music and talk to our sponsors, and we'll see you on the other side of the hour.
With Michele.
Stay with Michele Leroux Bustamante, who just showed up, so stay tuned. We got so many good comments about the live music on last week's show. We decided to do some more. I decided to do some more. So, play this old song called Is You Is. I got a gal that's always late every time we have a date, but I love her. Yes, I love her. I'm gonna walk right up to that gate and see if I can get it straight, 'cause I need her. I'm gonna ask her, is you ain't my baby. The way you acting lately makes me doubt you still my baby, baby. It seems my flame in your heart's done gone out. Yeah, a woman is a creature that's always been strange. Just when you're sure of one you find she's gone and made a change. Oh, is you ain't my baby. Maybe baby's found somebody new, yeah. Or is my baby still my baby too? Whoa, yeah. Yeah, a woman is a creature, always been a little bit strange. Just when you're sure of one you find she is you ain't my baby. Maybe baby's found somebody new. Oh, baby, is my baby still my baby too? Yeah. That's the sound of one hand clapping right there. All right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce to you a new sponsor for .NET Rocks, and I'm talking about Dundas Charts. And these guys make chart controls for ASP.NET and for Windows Forms applications. 100% managed code. Let me just lay on some features here for you, and then I'll give you some great testimonials from their customers, some of whom you already know. Great features. 100% fully managed code, great-looking charts. They can render in a bunch of formats, including Flash and SVG animation. Full object-oriented design, as I said, 100% managed code, no pinvoke, no ActiveX. They're fully integrated into Visual Studio with full IntelliSense. You can get just about 99% of everything you need in 2 or 3 lines of code. Drag, drop, boom, bam, you got your charts. Of course, if you're into customization, you can customize to your heart's content. These are not just static charts, they're controls, so they're interactive. Some have scroll bars, some have little sliders that you can move up and down. You have really cool things like animation, you have splines, you've got scrolling and 3D, 2D, this D, that D, just anything that you can think of in charts, they've got it. So the key to enjoying and understanding Dundas Chart is to go up to their website and download a fully functional evaluation copy. This isn't something that's going to blow up or stop working after a while. It's fully functional. The only caveat is they've got their watermark across the graph. Other than that, you can do everything that you can do with the release version. Fully functional. And now let me tell you about some of their customers. Microsoft uses Dundas Charts for .NET technology and SQL Server 2000 reporting services. CompuWare uses Dundas Chart technology within Dev Partner Studio. NetIQ uses it. Siemens uses it. Check out this quote from Ben Haraway at Siemens. Overall, Dundas Chart for .NET was a blessing. From the free trial to the easy installation, exceptional documentation and examples, great output and customization ability, and then the icing on the cake, helpful and persistent support staff. We were very happy with every aspect from Dundas, and there is no doubt we will look to them for solutions in the future. Jonathan Goodyear from angrycoder.com says, the first thing that struck me as I dropped the Dundas chart control onto a web page for the first time was the clean, well-done wizard that immediately popped up. Chris Sells says, not only was the Dundas chart more than full-featured enough, but the documentation was definitely geared toward getting a charting newbie started fast. John Maver from CompuWare Corp says, I don't think I could imagine a better experience with a third-party vendor. Brian Welker from Microsoft says, our developers like the fact that they have full control over the chart features through a well-designed managed code API. And when we interviewed Stephen Forte on .NET Rocks, geez, a long time ago now, he told us about an application he wrote for Zagat, online survey. He did their website. He redid their whole website and used Dundas everywhere. And he made a point of saying on that show how excellent these charts were. And that was back then. It was a couple years ago. So, here's the deal. Go up to www.dundaschart.com. That's DUNDAS chart.com. Download a free evaluation copy. Tell them Carl sent you, and rock and roll with charts. Dundas Charts. Advanced technology, advanced results.
Well, let it rain, let it pour.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our old favorites, ActiveReports.net, up there by Data Dynamics at datadynamics.com. Heard me talking about them on the show quite a bit, and there's good reason for it. Let me just tell you what it's all about. It's not all about enterprise reporting and big honking servers and a lot of complex processes and expensive licenses. It is about designing reports, including them in with your applications, with your web applications or your Windows applications, and deploying them appropriately. Easy to do. And very powerful, too. You get grouping, you get headers and footers and controls, and you can use any controls you want on the design surface. You don't have to just use their controls and their data sources. It's really, really awesome. And as far as the web, their output options include PDF and HTML and just straight text if you want. I mean, come on. You have a lot of options, is what I'm saying.
Now let it rain, let it pour, let it rain a whole lot more, 'cause I got them deep river blues. Just let that rain drop right on, let the waves sweep along, 'cause I got them deep river blues. Now if my boat sinks with me, I'll go down, don't you see, 'cause I got them deep river.
So do yourself a favor and go up to datadynamics.com. Check out all the other controls they sell up there, too. It's not just about ActiveReports.net. They've been in the business for a long time. I'm sure you're going to like it. www.datadynamics.com.
So let it rain, let it pour, let it rain a whole lot more, 'cause I got them deep river blues. Let the rain just drop right on, let the waves sweep along, 'cause I got them deep river blues, yes.
And we're back with Benjamin Mitchell and John Bristowe and somebody new who has joined the flock here just during the break, Michele Leroux Bustamante. How are you?
Well, hello, Carl.
Well, how are you?
Good, thanks for asking. How are you?
Are we going to have to bleep out every other word that you say here or what?
Well, I'll try and keep it pretty.
So you've been listening to the show?
I haven't been listening. I actually just saw Benjamin and John were recording .NET Rocks on their IM, so I said, hey, you want me to call in?
Yeah, because it's sort of, what we're talking about, you know something about. And
no, actually not at all.
Yeah, we just want to have some fun and tell some jokes, right?
No, just kidding.
Yeah, we know. So what we've already talked about just a bit to bring you up to speed is the state of Windows web, the state of web services, the state of the WS-E 2.0 enhancements, and the user experience or the programmer experience with those tools, and sort of the interoperability issues and hurdles that we've had to get through to get to here. And the picture is looking pretty good for web services going forward. It sounds like to me. The things that we haven't talked about in terms of what's missing, we've addressed the security issue, but what about addressing the addressing issue?
Yeah, so one of the things, when web services first came out, not all of the information, this kills me. The SOAP model is based on a simple idea of an envelope with a header and a body. But when they first shipped, they didn't put all the address on the envelope, basically. Some of the address went on the protocol. So when you were sending it to someone, some of the address would be in the HTTP header rather than actually part of the SOAP message. So it's a bit like instead of writing the address of your grandma on the front of the envelope, you tell the postman that it's for your grandma.
How many letters do you write to your grandma?
Actually, I'm getting her now in IM, but she did write a letter to me last week. So what's happening in WYSI is that they've updated the WS addressing spec and basically corrected this error so that we can now put all the information about where this message should go inside the SOAP header, and it can be completely independent of the transport. And the cool thing here is that you could, for instance, send a message partway over SMTP, and then there would be enough information within the message for the SMTP endpoint to know to send it over HTTP to a second point.
Right, and just emphasizing on that point, addressing is so critical to making this whole web services thing work. I mean, I'm with Benjamin on this one. It was kind of shocking when you're looking at the SOAP model and you're like, where is the addressing stuff? And the WS addressing is meant to pardon the pun, address this issue. But so the idea is that you're going to have any number of intermediaries that may operate over a variety of transports, and you want to make sure that the actual location of where the message is bound to is actually persisted as part of the envelope.
Okay, and so that's addressed in WYSI 2.0 as well?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now, what about policy?
So policy is a very interesting subject. The notion behind policy is that we have characteristics which we like to call assertions. Assertions are basically kind of like statements that we can make about service endpoints. And essentially what they say is they state things like characteristics and qualifications behind a service. So I may have a policy on my endpoint that says I require a security token persisted in the SOAP envelope. Alternatively, I may also want you to enforce encryption. If you're going to use encryption, I want you to use this standard. So policy is a way of actually decorating, if you will, service endpoints with additional metadata to provide additional information to plumbing. So things like toolkits like WYSI and ETTK will use these to provide more semantic detail when working with web services.
So just to drill it down, if you're a VB programmer and you want your web service to be secure, but you don't want to have to write all the code that checks whether a particular token's come in on the header and whether the body was encrypted or not, policy gives you a way of describing those requirements in an XML file somewhere else other than your code,
right?
So that your code can just be about the business logic.
Let something else worry about that.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
We had the same sort of notion in Com+, or now as we call enterprise services, this notion of interception. And interception works in the same way with the policy enforcement. We have this basically a policy document that says any message bound for this endpoint or that has these criteria like a SOAP action or something like this, you can say that I have these policy constraints against it. What that allows you to do is start ripping out all the infrastructure code that you would normally have to write, like applying a signature or applying a cryptographic signature, and start having the plumbing enforce it. So as you'll find that when you start enforcing policy, a lot of your code starts to go away, and the plumbing internals just takes care of it all.
So, for example, in your app, Carl, you wouldn't have to check anything about the key. You could just write a policy assertion that says, any message coming into my chat server should be signed and encrypted.
Right.
And WYSI will basically
and what happens if it's not?
The cool thing is that the policy enforcer sends an exception before it even gets to your code.
Oh, cool. So it'll send an exception back to the sender?
Well, essentially we'll send a SOAP fault, which will get serialized and is just an exception, but generally, yes.
So Dave Bost from the website sent us a message that says, Let's ruffle some feathers. What's the recommended approach for passing around your data in an SOA implementation? Custom classes or data sets?
Oh, man.
Oh, data sets all the way.
Oh, God. Data sets are bad.
All right, let's hear you, Michele.
Thank you. God, thank God.
I think we already, isn't that just a de facto agreement that data sets are bad?
Not on last week's show.
They're not interoperable in terms of their serialization format at all, so we certainly can't use those
This is true.
across platforms. They certainly carry some bloat with them in terms of the schema information, and that's not really necessary for the messaging.
Yeah.
And so... And there's just all kinds of other incompatibilities that arise from that. Now that we can do data binding against custom data types, we really don't need data sets anymore to fill a data grid. So
it makes sense to use the simplest thing available, in my opinion. To use the absolute simplest structure of any kind with the simplest everything possible, and to just not complicate it too much. I mean, I personally don't see the reason to use a data set if you're just passing around data that consists of a few strings and a few ints and a few this and a few that.
That's true.
Maybe some arrays. Yeah. And I think that accounts for most of our data, really, in a way.
It's easier for most developers to deal with data sets. If you're talking about coming up with a domain model all by yourself.
And if you're talking about real data instead of just a few strings.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I'm not saying data sets are good or we should be using data sets to pass data all around the world and through services and whatnot, but I'm saying that the average developer out there who, for the first 6 months before .NET was released and then the 2 years afterwards has been hearing nothing but data sets.
Well, it's also appropriate for a Windows-only kind of solution where the only reason to use a web service is for port 80.
Right. I think web services should avoid the use of data sets. I like to use Scott Hanselman's quote that he put on his blog: "Returning data sets from web services is a spawn of Satan and represents all that is truly evil in the world." I totally agree with him. No one put it better than that. So.
I think it's interesting though, because I've been following that debate and I've been meditating on Doug Purdy's post. Doug Purdy's one of the program managers for the Indigo team. His argument is that it might not be nice XML that you send in your message, but that someone at the other end could write something that understands it. So it's practically not very, very interoperable. But there's nothing wrong with sending a whole bunch of XML with the message. I think the second point that Michele made is the pertinent one, that it sends a lot of garbage that's not really relevant to the message. Right. Along with it.
Mm-hmm. Right, and particularly if you've already made changes to the data set that haven't been committed and you start producing diffgrams.
But we're talking about SOA here.
Well, you're really talking about the difference between querying a database, getting a data set back, and quickly being able to bind that to a data grid versus formatting it into some sort of intelligent object model that would be your business layer. And on the server side, you're usually dealing in object models. On the client side, I might agree that if you receive a data set because it's just a single-tier application, it's easier to just bind that. But really, what kind of application is that then if it's not hitting a remote server of some sort? It's a toy, right?
Right. And then you have to consider the possibility, I may not be a .NET developer. I may be a Java junkie. And so if I fire up Eclipse or something like that and I start pulling down WSDL files that serialize a big XML blob, I'm going to have no way in which to know how I have to deserialize that into an object model.
You know what it sounds like? It sounds like the people who are using data sets in web services are using, and this is what it comes down to, it's a Windows-only architecture.
Using it as remoting instead of...
Yeah, for remoting instead of... exactly.
The poor man's remoting, essentially.
It's fair to say that it's interop unfriendly, basically.
Yeah, and I'll agree with that.
So if you're serious about interop, then the data set will make a lot of pain for someone at the other end to understand what you're sending them.
Right, and I think that's the big difference between the arguments, whether, it's not to use data sets or not to use data sets, it's when it would be appropriate in a Windows-only architecture.
Exactly. But if we go back to the question that was the guy who wanted to ruffle some feathers about what we're going to be passing around in an SOA context, and I think that's where, data sets become problematic. Yeah.
He says it would be nice to take the schema designer in Visual Studio and generate your custom class as opposed to a typed data set. I'm sure this tool exists, but I haven't found it. Yep, it will.
I agree with that. Well, I actually had a question.
Go ahead.
Earlier, John mentioned WS star specs. Okay, so what is this stuff? I mean, like, what is WS Star? What does that amount to? What are we talking about?
Great question. So the WS specifications are basically a set of, there's been more than enough specifications published, but essentially the WS specifications represent those specifications that target particular composable attributes of web services. So typically they represent what we like to call horizontal protocols, protocols that cross-cut application domains or verticals. Things like security, things like routing and addressing and so forth. So when we refer to them lovingly as WS Star, that's what we're talking about.
I call them WS Tame.
Right.
They're kind of like web service building blocks, essentially?
Exactly. The whole notion behind WS Star is that they're composable. So you'll have a certain set of specs targeted towards security. You'll have another set of specs targeted towards addressing. You'll have another set of specs targeted towards metadata. But these specs don't always operate on the SOAP level, right? Some of them work in other areas like WSDL. So an example of that is WS Policy Attachment, which basically tells you about how you can augment UDDI models and WSDL definitions with policy. So they're not all working with SOAP. Some of them are working with other aspects of web services.
Okay. And as a .NET developer, how would I go about making use of the WS Star components?
Whizzy!
I mean, Whizzy! All right,
exactly.
there you go.
It all comes down to Whizzy.
Exactly.
Well, the other advantage here is that they're canonical, right? I mean, one of the things about web services that's intimidating for a lot of people, including me, is that there's so much stuff. I mean, exactly. XML, it's 3 little letters, right? And it's like the biggest clusterfuck of technology,
certainly
in the universe, right? And it's hard to really wrap your head around it. And it's not, I like the idea that there is one canonical set of components that are going to provide this functionality,
right,
and that I can take advantage of easily in code. Okay, so
and the other nice thing about that is, people have we've had this forever, right? We've had this whole argument of let's standardize, let's agree on a format. I mean, we have the same notion with Corpa.
Sure.
But the nice thing about with web services is that not only are we trying to achieve interoperability, but we have agreement across many vendors. So you'll notice that WS Security was not only spec'd out by Microsoft, but also by IBM and VeriSign.
Right.
So
important.
These are big players who are coming together who are saying, yes, we have got to agree on these things because we need to move the industry forward.
And the standards are at a good level, too. They're
not really standards. That's the other thing, right? They're specifications.
Specs, all right. Well, the specs are at a good level. They're at a level that just barely approaches into the application layer. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's good because, it's like the data set. If the data set, God forbid, would become the de facto standard for SOA, that would be a spec. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's at a great level.
The goal here is to bring it up into the air and have it consumable by everyone via various toolkits like the ETTK and Whizzy and so forth.
Right, but you can do whatever you want in your app.
Yeah, bring the head out of the water for a breath of air and then push it down back in by pushing that stuff into the infrastructure. So eventually, when we start agreeing on how these specs are worked out, we're going to be pushing it deeper and deeper into the infrastructure. So if you look at how the messaging architecture is moving, it's moving towards this code name Indigo. We're looking at a simple API to target these specs so that it's just as easy as applying an attribute to your class to get security up and running.
I think it's also important, though, to note that we are going to, for still some time to come, need to understand the XML to some extent because the interoperability between platforms on the WS Star level is not there today. And in order to find reasons why, this encrypted token is not working at my destination web service that might be open source or some other platform, I need to understand what the XML should look like by the spec. I need to be able to go to the spec, look up what are the encryption, asymmetric encryption algorithms that are supported by that platform, and then I need to understand my platform and know how to override that behavior so that it follows the same rule. So we still need to be able to dig like that today, and I think even with Indigo, we're still going to have to dig a little bit for some of the outliers.
I think so. The key thing is that, Rory, in terms of your question, the job of the .NET team basically is to give you an object model that means that you don't have to go down to the very scary XML level and understand all the WS specs. And then with Michelle's point and what John said about Indigo, the nice thing with Indigo is it lets you play at both levels. If you want to, you can stay up high and just add attributes and everything will work nicely. But if you do want to go down and munge the XML and you enjoy being a plumber, or you have to be a plumber to get your solution to work, there are lots of really nice refactored interfaces that you can use to get down there and do your work.
Okay, so that's interesting to me, because we're essentially talking about working with the XML, and one thing that I've found, especially in talking about the low-level work going away, is that I've never worked in an interop situation where I didn't have to go down and tinker with the XML to some extent. Mm-hmm. I mean, is this something? I mean, just shifting, gears a little bit. Is this something that do you actually see this going away, possibly? Because I've never encountered the situation myself, and it might just be that maybe the specs are good, the ideas are good, but developers just aren't implementing them, and there are issues there. But I mean, thoughts, I guess, like on that.
So I think what's happening. I mean, what you really want is the big vendors who write the toolkits you use as a developer to get together and sort this out, essentially. And they're having what they call workshops on each of these standards, where I think they ask everyone to bring a plate of food, like a savory plate, and they all get into the same room and they have a problem, and they basically do an interop workshop and prove that they can talk to each other. So in the long run, I see that the vendors are going to be producing object models that are interoperable on the wire level. The problem is that we're in a halfway house at the moment. We're not there yet. So
right.
You're right. Most practical interop situations today, you will be tooling as a plumber down at the XML level.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that as people start using WS-E 2.0 and solutions start bubbling up, of implementations that have succeeded, you're going to see probably some frameworks evolve and some tools. Let me talk a little bit about reliable messaging. This is something that we talked with Don Box a bit on our first show with him. Well, our only show with him, but we've talked to him since. And I guess the whole problem with reliable messaging is that just being port 80 isn't enough these days. In order to make sure that your message gets from me to you through a web service. And some of the barriers that he talked about were like NAT, network address translation, where, a single IP address is shared among lots and lots of different clients that have these 10 dot addresses. What are some of the other barriers to reliable messaging, and how does WS-E 2.0 address those?
So you've gone right to the point, Carl, of you've gone to the edge of WS-E 2, basically. A lot of people talk about the next generation of web services being secure, reliable, and transacted. So WS-E 2 covers off the secure aspect of that, but the reliable messaging and the transactions are things where we're still waiting to have an implementation of those standards that we can play with as developers. So
Indigo is the thing that's going to make that work.
Well, actually, I was going to say WS-E 2 is out now, and if you look at Rebecca Diaz's blog and the rest of the WS-E team, they're keen to hear customer feedback about what they should do in WS-E 3. So it's highly likely there'll be a WS-E 3 before Indigo.
Right, and reliable messaging is definitely one of the higher priority items that they're hoping to target.
I mean, I think the important thing is reliable messaging is sort of built on top of the protocols. So it's a higher level thing than the protocols to manage to ensure that you get messages 0 or more times. Get assertions about that.
Maybe think about an email that you send and you have no idea if it really got there, and especially now with all the spam filters, we don't know if anybody read it.
Okay.
So you send a message, a web service message. How do we know through acknowledgement that somebody received that message?
I see.
And in order to do that, we need to have a way to receive the acknowledgement, which means in theory we need an endpoint on the other side. So now we're talking two-way communication.
I got it.
And this is particularly important because we're not inherently tied to a request-response protocol with HTTP. Web services are completely, in theory, transport agnostic. So some of them will, in terms of one-way messaging or in terms of an asynchronous call, we may not get a response back for a long period of time.
Do you think the term SOA was devised just because we can't say web services anymore because they're too tightly defined already?
Possibly.
Is that a fair assumption, Michelle?
SOA was defined so that people at the executive level could talk about something cool too, I think. But
I had a question. I know we were discussing at the beginning of the show how easy it was to do web services with .NET. And thinking about that contrasted with the architectural thinking of SOA, it's not really supposed to be so easy. It's supposed to solve a lot of problems that aren't actually easy to solve. And I think there may be a disconnect there when you talk about web services and how easy it is. Most people using web services today, the Amazon Web Service as an example, are using the RMI model, remote method invocation. You're calling an object somewhere across the line and getting just a piece of data back. I think SOA is a lot more than that. And it's funny when I think about it, is it, maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but you can tell me what you think of this, is that you don't need to use web services to have a service-oriented architecture, and just because you're using web services doesn't mean you have a service-oriented architecture.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah, you definitely have to change. Sorry, go ahead.
So what is it?
So you definitely have to change your line of thinking in terms of targeting something that will be, God, I don't like using SOA so much, but that is SOA friendly in a sense. So there's an excellent book by Tim Ewald that was published quite a while ago that was called Transactional Comm Plus, in which he talked about how you try and make your calls. If you're going to go with a message-based architecture, you try and make your calls that go off to, say, a Comm Plus server more chunky and less chatty. And so that's one of the ideas behind this notion of going to a message-based architecture. This notion that I want to make sure that I get most of my semantic details in a one-off message and send that rather than making little invocations. This idea of thinking about objects and method invocation really doesn't apply so much now into service-oriented architecture.
Okay. So a little bit higher level than that.
Exactly.
Think of it as chunks of business logic that just live and you can use. So it's a mindset, not even just a development mindset, but also a business level mindset in terms of how you structure your enterprise and or your public-facing product offering.
And so at the heart of it, what's really the benefit of that?
Really, it's reusability. So it's object-oriented programming on steroids, right? It's taking that to a completely grand scheme where it goes outside of just the component level and it becomes at the application level, at the department level, at the company level, and at the industry level. So you can take it to whatever level you need to implement it. Some industries will actually implement SOA across communication partners, like think of insurance. You might have a carrier and an agent or broker and a vendor that all need to share data, and they might implement standards between them, and each of them, there might be multiple types of carriers that, fulfill policies in the industry that all do it the same way, but behind the scenes, we don't know how they really do it, right? It could go as far as that or as simple as just applications from the accounting department speaking to your production environment to bill customers.
So rolling back a little bit, Benjamin, you're probably watching the chat room here, and somebody named Snickers says, what about sending a message that says begin transaction? That one gets there and the next, but the one that says end transaction does not make it. Does the remote system then just hang for a few days with the transaction blocked?
Well, I think there's 2 points here. So how do you find out about a message not getting through? And the second one is, if you are going to do transactions, do you really want to be doing them across service boundaries? So reliable messaging will basically tell you if a message doesn't get through, and then you can respond to that event. So you can wind a transaction back, and you can configure how long you wait, basically how much effort you're prepared to put in before you decide that the message can't get through. The second
you define like a timeout or something.
Yeah, exactly. With transactions, the point is that giving someone else a lock, which is locking something effectively in a transaction and waiting for that and doing that over a service boundary is something that you might want to think about. There's two models. You can either work at that begin-end transaction level, and that's described in WS transaction, or you can go to a higher level and just what they call business process, which is where you try and do something and you act as if it will be done, but you have a compensating action that can be done if it fails. So the idea is, for example, with airline systems, you don't actually have a transaction on booking a seat on a plane. you basically just go in a queue of people who may possibly get a seat on the plane. That's not sorted out till check-in time. If something happens, then basically within 2 days you'll just roll off that reservations list if you haven't confirmed your payment for the flight. But there aren't any locks being held in a transaction sense.
Well, if you guys would like to just sit tight for a second, we'd like to get this item out of the way. It's a segment we do in the show. We try to do it every week, but this week there's a particular good reason to do it. This is the Linux vulnerability of the week.
Hello, Mr. Bull. Let's you and me fight.
And so the purpose of this is not to wave a finger at Linux users and tell them they have a bad operating system or anything. It's to silence the zealots out there who say that Windows is by nature a buggy and untrustworthy operating system and that Linux does not have bugs and does not crash. So every week we like to pick from a list of Linux vulnerabilities that are posted, usually at linuxsecurity.com/vulnerabilities. And usually there's quite a few of them, aren't there? There's quite a few of them. This week, it's a doozy. New Linux security hole found June 14th. This is from eweek.com. A Linux bug was recently uncovered by a young Norwegian programmer that, when exploited by a simple C program, could crash most Linux 2.4 or 2.6 distributions running on an x86 architecture. That's bad, isn't it, Joe? Unix is quote, using this exploit to crash Linux systems requires the user to have shell access or other means of uploading and running the program like CGI bin and FTP access, end quote, reports the discoverer, Oyvind Sather, and it's made, there's some characters in there I don't recognize. Quote, the program works on any normal user account and root access is not required, Sather reported. Quote, this exploit has been reported to used to take down several lame-free shell providers' services. Running code will damage a system intentionally, and hacking in general is illegal in most parts of the world and strongly discouraged. Along with the code needed to use the exploit, Sather also posted several patches to the 2.4 and 2.6 kernels that will keep the exploit from crashing systems. So, they have security holes, they patch them, just like Windows, right? But that's a particular doozy there. Yeah. Linus Torvalds already has the problem well in hand. He said, quote, I fixed it in my source code tree a few days ago, so it's in the current snapshots, and if I wasn't in the middle of a move to Portland, Oregon, no way! Linus Torvalds is moving to Portland, Oregon. I'd have released at 2.6.7 already. As it is, I'll hopefully have it done by tomorrow, June 15th.
But of course, all the sysadmins out there are going to patch the kernel themselves by writing the code.
Right. So
hello, Mr. Bull. Let's you and me fight.
In any case, eventing. Eventing in web services.
Rory, before you guys continue, if you run that code, I'll drive to Portland and I will do something bad to you and your dog.
Oh, you mean if I do it on your Debian system? Don't you worry. My dog is
safe.
What's
the matter? Don't you have a patch, Jeff?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Hey, I care more about uptime than a stable and secure system.
Okay. Oh, every once in a while, just a doozy comes along that makes it all worthwhile, doesn't it? Okay. I wonder how our resident zealot, Chris Anthony, is taking the news. And how he's doing in general.
I think he's kind of cooled down a lot.
Yeah, I think
he's cooled down. I think he's kind of drifted. And he was talking about taking a job, and maybe he did, and that's why we haven't heard much from him. So.
Oh, well. Yeah. So let's talk about events. Events are kind of a problem when you have a web server involved, aren't they? I mean, they sort of mean you have to have delegate data laying around. You have to know something about the client. And, geez, events just seem like something that requires a server in order to make happen. How is that going to work?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I mean, with WSDL, we've had events which they call notifications for quite a while. They're essentially one-way output messages. The problem is that, I being, JRandom.NET developer is going to just fire up my environment and start writing out an ASMX program. The problem is that it's based on a request response model. So the idea
you have to
behind
pull for it, in other words.
Sorry?
You have to pull for it, in other words.
Exactly. So, I'm going to send a request for you and say, do you have anything to tell me useful?
And that's essentially what I'm doing in my chat program too.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the specifications that has come out is WS eventing, and WS eventing is basically a very simple spec, arguably one of the simplest specs out there, that describes a mechanism in which clients can subscribe to what we call an event source. An event source is essentially an endpoint or a service that will broadcast events periodically. And what WS eventing... Sorry?
I just reacted with an O.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
So it broadcasts events, and this is a sort of a push model then?
Exactly. The notion here is that WS eventing will describe some basic element types. So it basically has defined a subscribe element, a renew element, as well as an unsubscribe element. So the idea here is that I, being an event sync or a client, I want to talk to an event source, and I want that event source to notify me when certain events occur.
Now, does that require? Does that require a web server on the client?
No, not necessarily. This can happen over any transport. Remember, web services. Really, the web and web services is really a misnomer. You do not require HTTP for services. The idea here is that I send a request, subscribe message to an event source saying I want to be notified when something happens at your end. You provide it some details saying here's where I want events to be sent to, and here is the lifetime in which I would like this subscription to last. Okay. The event source then sends a reply back saying, okay, here's an ID referencing your event, your event subscription, and I will send you notifications periodically.
But when it comes down to it, unless you have a connection that stays open somewhere, or you have a server that can handle requests coming in, you're going to have to pull for it.
Well, there is that idea, but if you look at the variety of transport and messaging layers that we have available to us, we could easily have it pointing to a queuing mechanism for certain events that may get sent back.
Right. So, and now you're losing your port 80 firewall friendliness, though.
Exactly. I mean that is one of the caveats, right? So, arguably there was a lot of work being done on the push model back in the mid 90s. Are we getting back to that stage where it's going to be all push? Not necessarily, but certainly eventing in the web services world in a platform neutral, runtime neutral way is certainly an important feature to have.
Cool. And so this is the stuff that's all coming, right? The eventing is all. Well, you said we have an eventing spec now.
We do. We definitely do. And there's been an interop workshop that's been conducted at Microsoft.
Okay.
In addition to that, there's probably about 9 or 10 implementations that I know of sitting around on various websites that I've seen. Some of which target different frameworks. I know that there are a few that target WYSI, and there are a few that target other runtimes as well.
Okay.
The truth of the matter is that we'll eventually see this in some version of the messaging stack, assuming that the eventing spec itself is adopted. The problem is that we have 3 specs that identify events. We have WS eventing, we have WS events, and we have WS notifications. All of these have been published by various vendors. Yeah. The one that Microsoft endorses is WS eventing.
Okay.
So it can get a bit confusing when you look at this, and we've had this whole WS star churn for a while now. I mean, we've had different specs that target the same issue but deal with it in different ways. It's just one of the natures of web services business, I guess.
Now, looking forward to Indigo, one of the things Don Box told us was that it is going to run on Windows XP. Has that changed?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Not Windows 2000 client?
Nope.
but it will run on Windows 2000 Server?
My understanding is that there's some sort of deep-level security stuff that isn't present on Windows 2000 that means it won't run.
Okay, so it's going to run on, as far as the client, XP and higher, and as far as the server, Windows Server 2003.
Yep.
Okay. So so obviously you don't have to have Longhorn to take advantage of Indigo. And that's the point I'm trying to make. So what's, where are we going? Why is Indigo going to be, as you say, it's sort of a refactoring and a repackaging of what they're doing with WS-AlphabetSoup. What makes it better?
Well, I guess the first big difference is it's baked into the platform. So it comes with all the sort of the support that the platform comes with, whereas WS-AlphabetSoup's on a short-term 2-year support cycle. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it may implement more functionality than is provided in WS-AlphabetSoup, although we know that the last version of WS-AlphabetSoup will be wire-level compatible with Indigo. So you can talk from an Indigo endpoint to some future version of WS-AlphabetSoup that ships on or before the Indigo ship date. So we know that will happen. And the main thing is that the WS-AlphabetSoup team is basically, their focus is on, as Don said, I listened to his .NET Rock show, as he said, the focus in WS-AlphabetSoup is getting an implementation out there into developers' hands, not necessarily on providing the easiest object model for developers to use. The functionality is more important than usability for WS-AlphabetSoup. Yeah. But with Indigo, the usability is the high order bit, as Don would say.
Right.
Yeah, I think Clemens Vasters had a comment on that recently, and Don wrote about that. It was your job is basically to make my job so easy and so boring, like I'm just basically redundant. And then Don wrote, "Yep."
No, actually, he said make it so boring so that I actually have no choice to survive except for to join Microsoft.
Right. That's right. That was what he said. Yeah.
Why have you unplugged from the collective? Why have you terminated your connection?
The key point I would drive, like Michael asked in the chat room as we've been talking, whether there should be any fear, confusion, or doubt about where to use WS-AlphabetSoup today, and should you not use WS-AlphabetSoup because Indigo may ship in future. The key thing is to ask yourself what you need in your web service. If you need security, policy, or addressing, then WS-AlphabetSoup is an excellent solution that will work today. Be aware that when you do use WS-AlphabetSoup, you may need to go through some manual upgrade steps. So we've seen that WS-AlphabetSoup 1 and WS-AlphabetSoup 2 aren't wire-level compatible, but they can run side by side. So if you wanted to take a WS-AlphabetSoup 1 to WS-AlphabetSoup 2, you need to do a little bit of tweaking, but it's not a huge investment. It's of the order of like hundreds of lines of code rather than thousands. So if you need those things today, then WS-AlphabetSoup is available and a perfectly good solution. It has a different support policy in that it's 2 years rather than the platform, which I think is 5 or 10. I'm not aware of the exact figure. But it's available today. Definitely go out and use it. There's no reason to hold back waiting for Indigo. And the story will just get better. The future versions of WS-AlphabetSoup, if the last version of WS-AlphabetSoup will be wire-level compatible with Indigo, so there'll be no difference in terms of the messages that are flowing around. So, as I say, if you need the functionality that WS-AlphabetSoup provides, then go ahead and use it. Don't be talked into avoiding it, waiting for Indigo that will ship in at some point in future.
I want to ask you guys a question. What the hell is what's happening with enterprise services? And is this part of the picture anymore? Is this something that we only use if we want Com Plus access? Enterprise services had all this rich stuff in it. It still has.
Yep.
All this rich stuff in it, even including SOAP. Is this a divergence here? What's going on?
So, John, do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think it's important to state that technologies like .NET Remoting, Com Plus, MSMQ, these technologies are not going away by any stretch of the imagination. Essentially, if you want to look at what's happening with enterprise services, it's being utilized by aspects of the plumbing or Indigo. So what you're going to see are this notion of, I don't want to say aspect-oriented program, but this notion of interception, this notion of having a DTC at the receiving end, this notion of having security baked in as part of the plumbing. All these ideas are going to be realized if you will, in some of the aspects of Indigo. So enterprise services is going to be there. It's going to be supported till the end of time.
So it's being utilized by Indigo, in other words.
If you want to be prepared for Indigo in terms of, building distributed architecture, then you should be using enterprise services today because it provides you with the security and the transaction support and the ability, of course, to do loosely coupled events and things like that we don't have any other way unless you want to roll your own around .NET remoting. .NET remoting is really not the path to Indigo. It's just part of cross-app domain within the same process. That's the best practice use for it, not to cross machine or process boundaries.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question except to say that enterprise services is very important today for any distributed system, and it will actually be the better path to working with Indigo because the Indigo release will be swallowing enterprise services within its API.
I see.
So I think the way I've heard it described is Indigo is the one API to rule them all. They got the remoting guys, they got the ASMX guys, they got the Is that the one program Doug and Don Box talked about? Did you see his talk, SOA talk at TechEd?
Right.
I did.
And it's always being written.
Right.
I think it's sort of tangential to that. They're basically saying at the moment you've got all these different ways of remotely doing distributed apps. You've got remoting and ASMX and Wizzy and enterprise services. Literally what they've done is put all these guys in the same building and said, come up with one programming model that means we have all the functionality available to any of these programs, like the one programming model, the Indigo programming model. And so that developers don't have to make this decision at the start about which technology they start with. They should have the functionality available to them all the time.
Makes sense.
You guys get in one room, sort it out, and come out with Indigo. That's kind of what they've been told.
Right, and the whole notion of the unification behind the programming model makes things so much easier. Recently, I believe it was Richard Turner who was on Channel 9, and he spoke lovingly about Indigo. There's about, I think, 3 episodes of him talking exclusively about Indigo. One of the questions he addresses, and this might be pertinent to your audience, is how would you describe Indigo to a VB.NET developer? So I'd highly encourage your listeners to go to Channel 9 and check that out.
Absolutely. We should check
the other thing, just in terms of your question about enterprise service, I think Michelle's answer is spot on. The thing to ask yourself when you start with a distributed application is, what does my application need to do? And if you need things, as Michelle mentioned, like transactions, then there isn't really an alternative then to use enterprise services available in the framework. I mean, you could roll your own, as you said. But so the thing is, with all these things, choosing the right technology depends on what you need in your solution. So if you need security and policy and addressing, then if you just need web services, ASMX does fine. What's in the framework does fine. If you need security, policy, or addressing or transport independence, then Wizzy's a good answer. And if you need things like the message queuing and transactions and loosely coupled events and things like that, then use enterprise services.
Actually, I'd like to just make one comment on that, and that is I think people do need, on the web services side, WSE, because without it, they're not getting the timestamp, which means they're not detecting message replay. And also with SSL, all you're doing is securing endpoint to endpoint. You're not securing across intermediaries, so anybody can read the message. So, in fact, without using WS Security, which is now the OASIS standard, you're not actually getting true web service security just using SSL today.
I agree completely. As I said, if you need security, then you shouldn't be using ASMX. You should move to Wizzy.
So Dave Bost says, are there any opinions on Microsoft's Enterprise Development Reference Framework, Shadowfax? Any experience implementing it?
So
what is
Shadowfax
that, anyway?
is a very interesting workspace on the .NET workspaces. Basically, what they're coming up with is a set of they're much like the PAG group in the sense that they're trying to come up with a set of best practices when looking at service-oriented architectures, encompassing things like Wizzy, like Indigo, and so forth. Shadowfax is not necessarily a technology, but essentially a set of recommendations. As far as my understanding of it, I haven't had much time to look at Shadowfax.
I think the important thing with Shadowfax too is it's kind of showing you how you can use the existing Microsoft technologies inside a service boundary. So I think it's important to sort of make that distinction that service-oriented architecture is about how you expose things internally. Shadowfax is looking at how you can build things with the existing technologies inside your service.
Right, and it's also interesting to note that I think the former program manager of Comp Plus, or still is the Comp, that whole team might have gotten rolled into another one, is leading up Shadowfax. I can't remember his name at the top of my head right now, but he's leading up that team for Shadowfax and there's a ton of developers that are contributing ideas and so forth.
Well, we only have a few minutes left, but I want to ask you each in turn to sort of say some last words, and I want to ask you this question. Give you a minute to brag here about some implementations that you've done, or one in particular. So if you've been involved in an implementation that used WSI or web services in an interesting way, brag about it. Tell us about it. Let's start with Benjamin.
Okay, so last year I helped a major global banking client develop web services security framework, and I was on the .NET side, and we had another team on the Java side. And using WSI, we were able to implement it in far, far less time, and it was just a much happier, much easier experience. WSI provided us with a lot of points where we could change things that we needed to make things compatible on the wire. And I just think Microsoft are getting it right with the programming model in WSI, and it just gets better in future. Compared to what the other team had to go through in Java, I'm glad I'm on the Microsoft side of the fence.
Mm.
I guess I'll go next. So as far as I do a lot of coding in the God.NET workspaces, one of which I'm a part of is NGallery. NGallery is basically an awesome tool for having photos put up online. It's an ASP.NET application.
Oh, right, yeah.
One of the things that I'm trying to do is expose the pieces of NGallery as services using WSI 2, so that eventually down the track, we may be able to interoperate with other galleries for, say, album aggregation and so forth. The other piece that I've been working on recently with both Michele and Christian Ware and various other people is a little side project that Christian called Plumeric Orange. The idea behind Plumeric Orange is that we're trying to bring some of the WS Star specifications that aren't in WSI into WSI.
Oh, cool.
And so one of the specifications that I implemented was WS Eventing. So we have an implementation. It's still a little bit rough, but we're hoping to open up the .NET workspace pretty soon to the masses.
Oh, that's great. Michele.
Well, in terms of implementation with clients, nobody's actually used WSE because most were waiting for WS Security to be standardized that we've dealt with. But one thing that we did that was really interesting, and actually John and Benjamin are part of this, is we did an event in May just before TechEd called an Interop Education Day, where we actually built our own web services interoperability between BEA, .NET, WSE 2.0, and open source Access.
Sweet.
Using Source ID for the Access side to do SAML token receipt. And we actually built a .NET token issuer. Actually, Benjamin built that. So he started that up. And then I kind of took that and worked with another gentleman, Chris Haddad, who did the open source side. And I used to do Access development, too. So we sort of played back and forth trying to tweak the encryption process, which is why I mentioned that earlier. So we call this Interop Warriors, this small group of us that we've actually put up a website to start blogging and continuing our experiments. So it's www.interopwarriors.com. And hopefully we'll get a chance to keep doing these events so we can build some samples and actually prove that things are working between the systems as these WS Star standards continue to evolve in each platform. Because, of course, WSI is probably the furthest along in terms of support today for a GUI interface to help the developer. But BEA is coming up with some new stuff, and certainly the open source side has some tools that you can plug in. So.
Oh, that's great. Michele, you want to tell any jokes?
Oh, you have time for a joke? So yeah.
I'm here till Thursday. Try the video.
I'll try and keep it tame this time.
No, actually, I'd prefer you didn't. So.
Okay, so this bear walks into a bar.
Yeah.
And he says to the bartender, "Bartender, give me a beer." Bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve beer to bears in bars." Bear says, "Look, bartender, give me a beer or else." Bartender says, "Sorry, we don't serve beer to bears in bars." So the bear says, "Look, you see that lady over there sitting at the bar minding her own business? Well, if you don't give me a beer, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to eat her bones and I'll spit out the leftovers, and I'm going to come back, and you're going to be sorry. You're going to lose customers." And the bartender says, "I'm sorry, but we don't serve beer to bears in bars." So the bear goes over to the woman, eats her up, spits out the bones, comes back, sits at the bar, and says to the bartender, "How about that beer?" Bartender says, "Sorry, but I don't serve beer to bears on drugs." Bear says, "Look, I'm not on drugs. What are you talking about?" He says, "What about that barbiturate?"
Thank you. Good night.
Oh, jeez. Well,
can I get one? I promised a friend I'd get a plug-in. Can
sure.
I get a plug-in?
Go for it.
There's been a lot of discussions about sort of Visual Studio test system and things like that coming out in future. I just wanted to plug that there's a solution today called NUnit add-in that's available free and works on Visual Studio 2002, 2003, and the Whitby bits. And if you want to look it up, weblogs.asp.net/NUnit add-in.
Excellent.
It's written by a guy called Jamie Cansdale, and he's working on implementing a solution that lets you do your unit testing in NUnit and run the same tests using the Visual Studio team system. So there you go, quick plug.
Excellent. Yeah, I've heard of him. Well, I can't wait to check that out. Well, listen, guys, thanks for having this web services and SOA roundtable discussion with us tonight. It really, Michele just sort of came out of nowhere. That was great. I'm glad you stopped by, Michele.
Thanks for letting me call in, guys.
Absolutely. And we'll catch you guys on the flip side, okay?
Hooray.
All right, we'll see you later.
Thanks. Bye.
All right.
Later.
So, Rory, what a show.
So, Carl. Yeah, that was a good show.
This is really fun.
It was fun having Michele drop in. Yeah.
Yeah. And the remote thing is working out nicely. The serious hardware and software that we have in the background doing the work of making you sound like you're right here in the room. It's pretty awesome.
Yep. It'd be cool to have the video thing. You know, I was thinking about that a lot during tonight's show. But...
I'm actually thinking of getting an iMac, because because you said that the video thing you have is Mac only and it works really well.
It kicks butt. It really does kick butt. So, yeah, if you did that, man, that'd be awesome.
That would be very cool. All right, man. Well, so what's on the horizon for you?
The horizon for me right now, I'm just writing a Longhorn article and working on the book. I'm thinking about doing some actual real office work sometime soon. I kind of miss actually doing this stuff. I wanted to have a little bit of time off.
Yeah.
And time to get over this stupid medication stuff, but I can't help it. I really do miss going in and typing and making things happen. So
yeah.
I'm looking at doing some of that. And that's it for me for the near future.
Okay. Let's invite the users to go to the website. That is www.franklins.net/call.netrocks and send in the secret namespace of the week. And we will pick a winner. Just in Here They Come. And if you've already won something, you are disqualified. And so we're only hearing from people who have won in the past. Oh, wait a minute.
So you use a fake name.
Yeah. And the winner of the Bag o' Schwag is Quentin Rexwinkle. Yay! Bravo! Quentin Rexwinkle from OTA in Oklahoma City. And it was system.g.wiz.this.swag.sucks. And there you go. Joe, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
It was good to have you in here. And Rory, of course, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, bye.
Well, bye. Keep rocking on. And
okay.
I'm going to be at Dev Teach, but we'll be back next Thursday live. So until then, we'll see you later. Okay.